there was embarrassment about who'd go first, like in school. So everyone's standing around, these peers, you know, Boy George is, you know, looking at Tony Hadley, who's looking at Sting, who's looking at Bono, who's looking at, you know, and they're all going, I don't want to go first, you know. And Paul Young just said, oh, for God's sake, I'll go. Like that. And they all, you know, I mean, it's so English and naff, you know.
Do they know it's Christmas?
They will.
They will on Monday.
Yes.
Won't they? They will when the new version is released. So 40 years ago, do you have any memories of that? I can barely remember 40 years ago, and I'm certainly old enough to remember the first one coming out and loving it. What are your memories of that first record and how it came together?
Pretty much most of it, because I'm asked about it for 40 years, you know, all the time. So I'm not sure if I'm just rehashing made up things, but no, I do remember it. There's a documentary of all the outtakes from the video of the day, which I didn't know existed. And it's so cute, is the word. You know, like, I'm sort of groping towards being Band-Aid Bob. And, you know, as these spotty oiks just about out of school, which we now know as global rock megastars, as they spill into the studio and say, what are we doing? And sort of, you know, picking their noses and annoying us in the control room with new babies. Sting just had his new baby. I just had a new baby. And there's dogs in there. It is the complete opposite of USA for Africa with their professionalism and, you know, these global artists and Quincy Jones handing out music notes. Our lot can't read, never mind music notes. You know, so that's what I remember. I remember... You know, people say, what about those Eagles? They weren't. They were young guns going for it, you know, and...
were there any squabbling over lines at all? Were there any squabbling over who sang what? Or did people just get on with it?
So the first thing is that Midge and I thought it was an okay song. You know, it'll do. Obviously, it did. So that wasn't the issue. So there was squabbling about, I prefer to sing this line because it's more in my register, and I think I could do, there was that sort of thing. There was embarrassment about who'd go first, like in school. So everyone's standing around, these peers, you know, Boy George is, you know, looking at Tony Hadley, who's looking at Sting, who's looking at Bono, who's looking at, you know, and they're all going, I don't want to go first, you know. And Paul Young just said, oh, for God's sake, I'll go. Like that. And they all, you know, I mean, it's so English and naff, you know, and like Bananarama arrived in some crap Volkswagen, you know, it really isn't, you know, Bob Dylan and Diana Ross arriving, like in USA for Africa, and it's charming in its knowingness about how good they were and where they were going, but charming in its innocence that they were happy to be doing. Don't forget, Spandau Ballet came from Japan to do it. Duran Duran came from Germany. I mean, knackered, all of them. Hadn't slept, none of them. Sting wandered up the road with the Sunday Times under his arm. Paul Weller looked like beautiful, looking like Robert De Niro. I'd forgotten Paul was there from the very beginning in Midge's studio, just looking so effortlessly beautiful and cool. So that's what I remember of that one. The second one, the 2004 generation, my memory was more sort of slapdash. I mean, this was slapdash, but it was amateurish, but so on the money. The other one I thought wasn't going to work, and then it came together brilliantly. And the last one, the 2014 generation, I was amazed at how good this generation was, you know, Sam Smith, Ed Sheeran, Rita Ora, you know, 1D, Harry Styles, you know, Guy Garvey, I mean, Emily Sandé, you know, Angelique. I was just amazed. And I'm still amazed when we play the track, the quality. I mean, I'm serious, like, you know, they're kids, we see them, we play their tracks, but retrospectively, the quality of these musicians, of course they're world dominant, you know, and it comes out of this country, and they all show up, you know, give them a call, will you show up? Okay, when is it? You know, that's it. 3 generations show up, 3 generations of parents and grandparents have bought this to make sure people in an unlucky part of the world get to live, and the radio stations and the disc jockeys and producers and the record companies and the record shops and the lawyers and publishers just say, yeah, we'll go with this. You know, it's It's got so little to do with me and so little to do with an agreed effort that no one really asked to do anything. And this latest version, and I'm not saying that to do it, I genuinely mean it. I thought Midge's version, the first one, was the best, I think, even though the other two were the top of the range producers of their time. I think this is something
special.
Really special.
What you're describing really is the kind of perfect spirit of Christmas that we would all like to believe, isn't it? That coming together to do something wonderful on every side, whether it be on the record, producing it, buying it. It's just a lovely thing.
I hadn't thought of it quite like that before, but the thing I say is that, you know, it is about that pause in the world. We take a breather, we pause, we decide we'll get together despite whatever family dramas or unspoken animosities. We get together, we buy each other tokens of that affection, even if we're not getting on. We exchange gifts, we spend time thinking about it, we get out the tree and the baubles, but we also tend to notice the more vulnerable. We tend to see more someone cold on the street. We tend to think about the older person in the flat alone. We tend to do that. We know that's a fact because all the charities dealing with that, the Sally Ann, Help the Aged, all do better. We seem to take that on board, that this is a moment where whoa, hold on, some perspective. And this record came along and added something to that mix. That the song is There's a World Outside Your Window. And to take those three generations of artists and parents and audience and DJs and all that and try and revivify the sense of the original one you talked about. Not just revive, not reimagine, but revivify it. Make people sense the original need for this, which continues. And Trevor Horn has unbelievably done it. It is properly beautiful. Forget maybe what it's for. Forget the people on it. As a song, if you heard it for the first time, you'd go, whoa, seriously? And you're about to hear it. So I asked him to put the three generations onto one record. And he said, how? I said, no, you're a producer. Off you go. And he said, but they're all singing the same song, the same line. I can't just put, And I said, well, work it out. And he did. They're so right. This track is so right, so necessary, so good. It is the arc of British rock and roll over 40 years on one record. Let me tell you who you're going to hear as the house band. First, if it's true it is the arc of British rock and roll, you have to have a Beatle. Of course you do. You get the benediction. It starts with the greatest of all bands, and he'd better show up. On bass, Paul McCartney and Sting. On drums, Roger Taylor, Queen, Phil Collins, and Danny Coffey of Supergrass. On keyboards, Tom York of Radiohead. On guitar, Paul Weller, Midge, Justin Hawkins, Johnny Greenwood of Radiohead. And then you have the singers, and you have a young Sting singing with a young Harry Styles, a young Boy George singing with a young Rita Ora, a young Bono singing with an old Bono. It just goes on. Sugar Babes and Bananarama, Underworld and Kool and the Gang, Guy Garvey and Paul Young. It's mad. I wanted it on Top of the Pops before it got into the charts, and the rule is you couldn't get on Top of the Pops. You had to be in the top 40. So I rang Michael Grade, who was head of BBC, and I said, we need to go on Top of the Pops. He says, well, the rules are this. And I said, yes, but you make the rules. He said, well, I'm not breaking them for you, mate. And I said, well, we need to. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you your own programme just before Top of the Pops. What? So he said, maybe somebody should introduce it. So, as you do, I called David Bowie.
Well, as you do.
And
nobody else does.
David said, yeah, of course I'll do it. And on the record, on the long version, on the video, there's David from 1984, looking so beautiful, so cool, wearing my crap Feed the World t-shirt because he was wearing, groovy clothes. I said, you can't do that. And he introduces it, and it just starts, and seriously, it's a wonderful track.
There is a feeling, isn't there, that times have changed. that charity has changed, and we know Ed Sheeran's had concerns about being used on this. What is your view of that?
Well, we've always accommodated. Look, part of it is I love all that debate. That's part of the whole thing about it. The more debate around the issues, the more we focus on what this is for. The more news stuff around it, the more it's in the currency, it's in the cultural debate. That's useful politically for us because it affords us even more access. So how many hundreds of thousands get this record, we amp it up politically. So the debate is useful. It's valid. Times change, as you say. We absorb that change. We see if we can learn from it. We can reject some of it or not. The nature of Britain changes. The nature of values changes. What's new and all that. But we don't think about it. We absorb it. So that from the first one to the second one, there's a difference. And the third one, there's a complete change of the lyric. And we always allowed the singers to sing whatever line if they came up with a line they preferred to sing, they could sing it. If they didn't want to do this line because it wasn't in their register, they didn't think that worked for them, they could do it. On the third one, the UN called us and they asked us, would we do the song again? Because they needed people to be, well, the Ebola crisis was happening. We did it at the UN request and we changed the lyrics to deal with that. And on this one again, taken on board the sensitivities, we've changed them again for this. So it's changed and it works for this moment now. And as for the people, if Ed's got concerns, I've put in the call. He's a great bloke. He's a brilliant artist. We'll work it out.
Sounds like a plan. Really lovely to chat to you. I could talk to you loads more because you're fascinating to listen to, but we are going to go. But thank you for coming in to talk about this on Smooth Radio. Thank you.